Hello, folks. My name is Steph. Welcome to this webinar, and I'm going to give a few minutes for any attendees that might show up a little bit past that half-hour mark. So we'll get started here in about another minute or two. If you're watching this recording after the live webinar, feel free to drop any comments below and reach out directly. I'm happy to answer anything that comes up asynchronous as this live presentation. All right, it's been a couple of minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. If anybody else joins, I will go ahead and admit them, but I want to get this rolling and be respectful of everybody's time, including mine. So welcome to this webinar. It is titled Maximize Your Online Presence, Quick Wins, Accessibility, and SEO Boost with the POUR method. So this is a method that we've come up with, myself and my company, Southwest Bits Limited. So let's get rolling. So a little bit about me. Why is this important? Why is this information something that I'm sharing? Well, I'm actually a late bloomer into the tech industry, and I kept hitting a bunch of glass ceilings before getting into tech. But it drove my desire to make people's interactions with technology much better, that moment where humans and computers interact. I got tired of really seeing folks struggling there. So I went to school, became a software engineer, and realized, you know what, I like people too much, and being in the code was too far away from the people. So I pivoted into product leadership as a SaaS product owner and really helped lead a company in a lot of transitions on the back end with processes and updates and really revolutionizing the entire ecosystem by releasing a new product that gave them a bridge and pathway into new ventures in an accessible way, because the product that they had was not accessible. And through all this time, I was doing web development, but unfortunately in 2023, last year, I was a part of a mass layoff for that company where I was a product owner. And so as doing web development for the last 5 years, I decided to really lean back into that. And I looked at the landscape, and there are so many web developers out there doing lots of really cool things. And it's been a while since I've really dove into that world. But one thing I noticed is accessibility is almost always one of the last things that a company, an individual thinks about when it comes to the internet. So I decided to combine all my skills and niche down into web accessibility. So who does that affect, right? We talk about disability and we think about these physical features and things. Well, this is a screenshot from the CDC. They're reporting that approximately 1 in 4 to 1 in 5 American adults is living with some sort of disability. They list them out here that affects their independent living. And the parts that I've highlighted here are the ways in which the internet begins to sort of overlap with those disabilities. So we're talking mobility. Think about movement in the hand, shaking, cognition, the way people think. We've got hearing issues, and then vision as well, right? Folks with color blindness, low vision, dyslexia, those types of things. So I did the math for you. That actually comes up to a clean 38.5%. So that's an overall huge potential market. And there are some reports out there that say that there are upwards of billions and maybe even trillions of dollars of money, disposable income controlled by this population of folks. So how do those four elements tie into web accessibility beyond just how it's used, right? And if you're here, you've likely heard of WCAG, ADA, or Section 508. And it seems really big and complex, but all of those things sort of come together in the digital world, and that's how we define what is digitally accessible. So typically we follow the WCAG principles. If you're working in more federal and government spaces, you're going to be looking closer at Section 508, the revised version. And those are really similar and close to, and actually drawn from the WCAG principles. So when we're following those principles, all of our products, any digital artifacts, whether that's a website, a SaaS product, marketing website, forms for folks to sign up, informational PDFs, like white papers, case studies, those types of things, all of those elements need to be perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And those four words are where the POUR method comes from, right? So it's an acronym. We love acronyms and computer science. So doing some research, accessibility really isn't all that accessible, right? We've already talked about some things that sound really confusing. And then I'm adding in these principles that you have to follow along with guidelines and different levels. So drawing on my background and skill set, I looked at the environment, and there's not one way to do this. So I came up with an approach that I've been using since the beginning of the year. And it sort of started here, like at doing the research, and then I wanted to see how it would apply. So a common case study or a common problem that comes up is, hey, I made some edits to a website, and it's not ranking on Google at all. But it's also, I have some suspicions that it's not accessible. So I took some time and I dove into my background as a software engineer and web accessibility, and I started to look at ways that I could address both of those key problems with the minimal most effort from like one person, because it's just me. So I came up with the POUR method, and you'll see here my hunches were right. I did some tests, and this score right here, the 58, showing no, I'm not compliant, I'm not accessible. I also used a tool called Google Lighthouse on the Chrome browser. This was also showing that accessible, but really underperforming where I'd like to be personally. So again, I did some poking around and looking, and to set up a Google Search Console, it takes some time. You don't set it up and then all of the numbers start coming through. So I had set this up and seen nothing. I wasn't getting any impressions or anything. This screenshot from February, these are changes that had been live for, I think, a month already. So in a month's time, I collected, this was the baseline, right? 3 impressions, just under that 20 position. So not ideal, not very accessible, according to 2 different reports. And so again, I dipped into my bag of tricks and made some changes, and then reran those reports. I did this within a week of that last change. I wanted to see what week over week those changes would take. So all the edits that I made happened within a day. And then I was able to do all of the accessibility automated reports in that same day. So you'll see here, I went from a 58 to an 85. On this report, I went from, I think it was an 86 to a 92. So definite improvement there. Much better across the board to see something like that. And then again, the impressions went up, right? Now I was ranking at 15. It's not a huge amount of movement, but this is also a new effort for me. So definitely it helps. There's real progress that can be measured, is tangible. My situation and this example is extremely low level. But imagine you're getting hundreds of thousands of website visitors a day and you're not accessible. That sort of translation and increased views, that could be huge for your business and create brand loyalty. So how do I do all this? As I had mentioned when I was showing you the case studies and showing you those screenshots, I did some audits, right? And for this level of what I was trying to do, just execute the POUR method, make sure I had base level, good to go, all those types of things, nothing reaching for the moon. I used 2 automated tools. Now, if I wanted to go even further, which I have done since, I would add in some manual audits as well. But the automated tools, there are actually quite a few free automated tools out there. The one that I like to use is called accessibilitychecker.org. Unfortunately, they've partnered with a company or some companies that are widget-based, and their overlays for accessibility. That's a whole other can of worms. But the accessibility checker itself is really useful. And you saw in those reports that it gives you suggestions and those types of things. So if you'd like to see more of what that looks like, I'm happy to dive in. The other piece of what I did do an update, I really kept it super minimal. I only looked at image tags. I added meaningful alt attributes or alt text. So anything, not every single image needs that, but anything that helps convey the meaning of what the website or the product is trying to convey, those are really important images to get the alt text right on. And then the other piece is the heading order, right? The headings need to be in a meaningful order. And I notice on most sites I look at, I'd say the majority, headings are often used in a way, in like a design aspect, right? And so you've got H1 headers that are really big, and then H3 is a little bit smaller, and it just kind of goes down from there. And it makes a lot of sense if you're on a design world. But if you're thinking of accessibility and how people are understanding the information that's being conveyed and actually how a machine reads that off through a screen reader, it goes in the meaningful order of headings. So a suggestion that you often hear in SEO is make sure you've got header text, right? And that's another suggestion that you hear in accessibility. Where they overlap is that they need to be in a meaningful order to convey that information properly and in a similar way that a sighted user would be absorbing that information or reading it from your screen. So you want to do those in order. Make sure you've only got one H1 tag at the top in the title with a word or keywords that you really want to be ranking for, and then everything else underneath it. Those are navigational. So think about H1, 2, and 3. That's the order in which those are going to come through, or a screen reader is going to jump to those sections. So a couple of high-level things. I've got links here in the deck that I will provide alongside the video that you can get access, but a quick search or work with an AI tool like ChatGPT will absolutely get you information on how to update these resources properly. So a few caveats to all of this, right? That's a lot of information. So when I did those tests, the automated tests specifically, you need to be mindful of what type of hardware. I did all of these tests just on a desktop. I didn't go through and test on a mobile device, a tablet. I didn't even test on a different operating system. So those are some key things that you want to think about as you're starting this effort for yourself. Another piece is I mentioned that I use Google Chrome tool. That's the only browser really that I use to test all of these items and all of this information that I'm showing you. Since building this out, I have tested on multiple devices and Safari and different types of things. But a big call out here is any plugins that you have are going to affect especially Google Chrome's Lighthouse. So try and do any of that stuff, any of those testings in a private or incognito browser. And then the next thing is I maintain a few different types of sites, a hard-coded one, a light speed Equid store, e-commerce Equid store, and then a WordPress blog. And so, that gives me the opportunity to test out lots of different things. And I want to note that this does work on WordPress. This process works on WordPress. So I imagine it will convey nicely over to another CMS system like Webflow, Squarespace, etc. So what do people say about this when I start talking to them? I'm like, wow, that is an important amount of information and a lot to remember. And it absolutely is. I'm constantly going back and forth and where did I write that? So again, I came up with a simple process, what I call the core method. And the way that we execute it is from the bottom up. And it includes some key guidelines to ensure that we're hitting that very bottom A-level WCAG. And that goes A, AA, and AAA. So the core method, its instructions and everything is contained in one single PDF, which I'll get you the QR code here in a few. And then as soon as you have access to this, based on what we've talked about and the QR code that you're going to have, you should be able to get fired up and start with all of this right away. So I'll give a few minutes, or since I'm recording this and nobody's here, I'm going to go ahead. Feel free to pause the video, capture that QR code, but I'm going to skip to the next slide so we can cover the core method a little bit more in detail. So again, we start from the bottom up, like we're pouring into accessibility, right? We're pouring our efforts there. And you'll notice those stars kind of build up as well. So that gives you an idea. We're going from the bottom up. So understandable and robust. That's where we start with creating digital products. And we want to ensure that it's navigable, right? Those headers are in the right order. We want to make sure that processes are complete. A form can be navigated through with a tab. And the labels are read out on a screen reader that makes sense. And then AV, audio visual controls. Think about flashes. Think about videos that you've got on your website. All of those need to have controls. They need to have closed captioning and some way to pause the information so that folks who maybe have a cognitive issue can slow everything down and really take the time to absorb what's being presented to them. So once you complete all of those things, as I said, I was able to do most of this and address that on my site within about a day. And the next part came about a week later. What you can do from here, once you've completed the UR pieces, the bottom part of the core method, we move on to the PO, perceivable and operable. That stuff, those changes may be perceivable and operable to me, but I need to make sure that they're perceivable and operable to somebody else, especially my customers, my key markets. So what I suggest here, especially for small business owners, if you've got a storefront or any of those types of things, you're going to events, any of that, check out this survey that I've got and send out some messaging like, hey, we are on a mission to improve our digital experience by X date. And you can be a part of it, right? You can give incentives, X, Y, and Z. There's a lot of ways to go about it. I've included a copy of the survey that I like to use as a Google form. It is not set up to collect emails, but feel free to use anything that's on this website. And in the footer there, you'll see links to my blog and then the checklist that actually those guidelines are pulled from. So huge amount of help here. And yeah, again, this is not legal advice. These are just suggestions, ways that I've seen to make this work. And there is no standard way out there to do this. This is a really similar way as one of the methods that I've seen. It's called the trusted tested method. Feel free to go check that out. But this is a little bit more compact. This allows you to get there much quicker. And again, lays the groundwork for that iteration. So for me, I have other work to do. I'm going to keep plugging away at this because things in SEO have changed. WCAG guidelines are constantly being updated. And then the process to just update new tools are always coming out and being released. So My next is I'm going to keep monitoring these changes. As I mentioned, most of these edits and everything that I've captured here was from Q1. So I have been monitoring. I have been doing some keyword research. I've been working on the SEO field, keeping my eye there. I'm not a designer and I'm not an SEO expert. So those two things are things that I'm learning, right? So I'm going to keep learning about tools and best practices where all those things are concerned. And based on those learnings, I'm going to take it and grow my knowledge and keep iterating this effort. So that's what I'm going to keep doing. For you folks out there in Wonder Internet land, I absolutely encourage you to start your web accessibility journey. Reach out to me for your first free 30-minute consultation. We can talk about what experiences you've got digitally already set up, and what are your dreams, what are your goals and aspirations for not only your business, but for your digital product, right? Are you looking to just grow your market, or do you have ideas and hopes to be a vendor of government and of any kind of government contracts or anything like that? If that's the case, you definitely need to make sure that your artifacts, your spaces, everything that is accessible to the public and your employees is following accessibility guidelines. So yeah, feel free to, again, reach out, book any time that you find there, work on applying the form method yourself, and if you'd like some extra help, please feel free to reach out anytime. I am always happy to meet with folks. This is a topic I'm extremely passionate about. So I thank you very much for taking the time to hang out with me for about 30 minutes and learn about a nifty method to improve your SEO and accessibility with just a few simple actions. Have a great day.